Hey everyone, this is Moreland with a 2017 gear progression guide for Black Desert Online. This guide will show you which pieces of gear you should be buying off the market, as well as how to prioritize your upgrades. We will not be covering how to enhance your gear, so if you want to know, for example, how to upgrade your weapon from 0 to plus 15, you'll need to check out the enhancing guide for that. This guide will simply talk about which items to pick and when to get them. We're going to start by talking about the very first items you should get as a beginner, then work our way to an intermediate setup, and wrap up by talking about long-term accessories and boss gear. As always, check the timestamps in the description for shortcuts if you're looking for something specific. Let's go ahead and talk about the first thing that you should buy off the market as a new player, which is going to be a Kreia or a Rozar weapon. So every class has Kreia and Rozar, and as far as which one of these two to buy, it doesn't really matter. I would just get whichever one has the most listed on the market. They're about equal in strength. They both have good AP, good accuracy, and 2 crystal slots. But in some cases, one of these can be harder to buy off the market than the other. In the process of enhancing these, you're going to need more versions of the item in order to repair it while you do your upgrades. So in this case, there's a bunch of Rozar gauntlets listed, so you could buy that if you want to. But the Rozar blade and the Rozar short sword, these are sold out, so maybe you want to avoid those and go for the Kreia version instead. Just kind of do a quick comparison based on your class and see which one has more listed on the market. That'll make things easier for you when it comes time to upgrade. But Kreia or Rozar, and then immediately upgrade these to whichever one you pick, upgrade it to +7 with any weapon stones that you get while leveling. You can safely upgrade your item to +7 without any risk of failure. Once you're ready to go beyond +7, look for an enhancing guide or ask a friend how that works. But go ahead and upgrade directly to +7 right away because you can't fail. Now for offhands, it's a little bit more complicated. These have different names for every class, so I'm going to put a list on the right side of the screen there. If you're one of those classes in the top right that has an offhand that strictly increases your AP, then you should go for those. That's going to give you the most significant increase in power in terms of PvE and leveling. AP is by far the most important stat for leveling up. You don't really need accuracy in PvE. You need a little bit, but not enough where it should be a main concern. Accuracy in PvE really comes into play when you're fighting like very high level mobs, like purple mobs, and you shouldn't be doing that. It's not efficient. So for fighting red, white, and green mobs, just focus mainly on AP, and don't worry about accuracy until it comes time to get into PvP. So if you see those offhands at the bottom right corner, the reason why I have different offhands listed for those classes is because the pure AP offhand for those classes isn't that good. In fact, it doesn't really exist. If you see here for Warrior and Valk, this doesn't give straight AP, it gives a combination of AP and DP, the Axion shield here. And by the time you upgrade this, the amount of AP that you get just isn't that exciting. So in this case, I recommend that you go for that accuracy plus evasion option instead, the Vanguard's shield. Vanguard's just has a really nice blend of stats overall, and this is going to be useful in the long term as a PvP offhand. Even when you get to the point where you have boss gear, you're still going to be using a Vanguard's shield for PvP. So you might as well just start investing in that now, since the Axion, like I said, the stats in the Axion just aren't better enough, in my opinion, to make it worth the investment. And the same is true for getting a Sayernaut or a Leather Vambrace if you're one of the classes that uses those. So again, just look at the right side of the screen, see if your class is at the top or the bottom, and then gear out accordingly. Now, for accessories as a starting player, it's pretty straightforward. You want to go for the Barris necklace, the Barris earring, and the Barris belt, and you want to upgrade these to duo as soon as you can. So getting a duo Barris accessory is not that difficult. Sometimes they'll even be sitting on the market. You can just walk up and buy a duo Barris that someone else has made. You can buy Pry Barrises and just upgrade them real quick and see if they go up. If you don't know how to upgrade accessories or the best way to do this, check out the enhancing guide part 2. In that video, I upgrade a Barris necklace from scratch all the way to Try. So if you want to see the process, you can do that. But it's pretty easy to get your hands on a duo Barris accessory, whether you make it yourself or whether you buy it. And again, you want to do that for the belt, for the earring, and for the necklace. The only one that's different is the ring. The reason why you don't go for a Barris ring is because there's a better option. The blue coral ring will give you 5 AP right off the bat, and it's really cheap. You don't have to upgrade it at all. A +0 ring already has 5 AP. You can get these off the market for about 600k with the current prices. So go ahead and get the blue coral ring for this slot, get 2 of these, and then just fill out the rest of your slots with duo Barris accessories. Last pieces you need to start off with are some armor pieces, and here it doesn't matter too much what you get as long as you pick armor that has 2 crystal slots. When I was leveling, I used the Grinnell helm and gloves for the extra 5 AP bonus, and then I had heavy chest and boots for the extra 250 health. But none of these set bonuses are that crazy. If you want to use something else, it's not that big of a deal. Like I said, as long as it has 2 crystal slots, that's the main thing that you want to look for on your armor. Another good option now that the Roaring Magical Armor is in the game, and probably what I would actually recommend for new players if you don't know what else to do, is to get yourself heavy shoes, helmet, and gloves, and then just use some sort of filler piece for your chest until you can get the Roaring Magical piece. Heve is just a really good set. It's versatile. You get the health bonus regardless of which pieces you use, unlike Grinnell, where you have to have very specific, you have to pair the gloves and the helm, or you have to pair the armor and the shoes. You can't mix and match and do like helm plus shoes. It won't give you any bonus. So Heve is more versatile in that regard. I think 3-piece Heve plus the Roaring chest piece is probably the best way to go for new players, but like I said, don't sweat this too much. If you want to use a different set, as long as it has 2 crystal slots, feel free to, experiment and do whatever you want. Now, let's go ahead and move on to talking about the intermediate setup that you're going to be progressing towards as you level to 56 and beyond. Going back to the main hand, the Kreia and the Rosar, you're going to want to stick with whichever one of those you picked and level it all the way to Duo. So the reason why we stop at Duo is because once you start going for Tri, this has a chance to go back down to Pri again. So basically you can degrade from +17 back to +16. You should be able to upgrade this to +15 without too much headache. Weapon stones are pretty easy to come by while you're leveling and grinding. You can also try to buy some off the market. The concentrated weapon stones that you need to get these to Pri or Duo are a little bit harder. You might need to do some gathering, or you can try to get those off the market as well. But basically, getting the weapon to Pri or Duo is a significant upgrade. It's 8 AP for Pri and another 8 AP for Duo. That's really going to be noticeable on your first weapon, so I would go ahead and do that, but I would not go all the way to Tri. It's going to be too much of a headache to go to Tri. Unless you literally get it on the first attempt, then you're going to have to keep rebuilding fail stacks to get Duo over and over. You're going to waste a bunch of materials, and it's just not worth your time. By the time you're ready to go beyond Tri on your main hand, you should be thinking about getting a boss weapon instead. We'll talk about that in the last section. So take your main hand to Duo. If you want to use an ultimate reform stone on this, you can, but I wouldn't say it's that important. It's much more important to use an ultimate reform stone on your offhand. If you look at ultimate offhands, you can see that each of these has special attack damage, and that will increase things like back attack damage, down attack damage. It's very noticeable. So if you get your hands on an ultimate weapon reform stone, prioritize using that on your offhand. Using it on your main hand isn't that important, but it is definitely noticeable on the offhand. Follow the same philosophy here as the main hand, upgrade it to Duo, and then hold off and work on other things in the meantime. Some of these offhands are worth pushing to Tri and beyond, but we'll have to talk about that in the next section. When you hit 56, you're going to have a choice of an awakening weapon to get, basically either the green one or the blue one. Obviously, the Dandelion, the boss weapon, is going to be the best one to get long term, but it's very hard to acquire, and you probably can't afford it as a new player anyways. So you're going to choose between the green and the blue weapon, and I recommend you make this choice based on whether or not you can resell the blue weapon on the market. So if you look at awakening weapons and you filter these, you look at Tri, you can see which ones you can resell and which ones you can't based on the price in the listings over here. These appear as yellow because they've been reformed. So, for example, this spell scythe right here that's blue has been reformed into the yellow version up here. It's the same weapon, just somebody used an ultimate reform stone on the blue one. You do not want to use an ultimate reform stone on this until you are done enhancing it. So I recommend that you do upgrade this all the way to try. Unlike your main hand and your offhand, this should be the first weapon that you go all the way to try with. And the green one is a lot cheaper, so if you're strapped for cash, go for that. But eventually you are going to want the blue one. Like I said, Dandelion is very hard to come by, and you're probably going to be using this weapon for a long time. So eventually it's worth going for the blue one as long as you can resell it when you're done with it. If you can't resell it, then it's not going to be worth it. It's going to be too much of a money sink. But if you can sell it and get, 85% of your money back after tax, then it's worth getting one of these and reselling it once you upgrade to Dandelion. Just keep an eye on these. Some of them can be pretty hard to sell. If we look at, for example, the Ranger Awakened weapon, it's currently min priced, which doesn't always mean that it won't sell. Like if you look at the timers over here, it looks like these are selling. They just might take a couple days before somebody buys them. But just be very cautious. As the game continues and as the Steam launch kind of fades away, more and more of these are going to be listed on the market as people get their dandelions, and the prices will eventually crash for all these. There's no really way to predict when that will happen, so just be careful and upgrade to this as long as you feel like you can sell it when you're done. Now let's talk about intermediate accessories next, and we're going to start off with earrings because earrings are the best example of cost per AP efficiency. And what I mean by that, we're going to use Blue Coral versus Witch as an example here. And basically, when it comes to upgrading your accessories, you want to focus on how much AP you're getting per silver spent. So in this case, we're assuming that you still have that Duo Beres earring that you started with 4 AP. This could also be a Jarrett's earring, whatever. I'm assuming that as a new player, you have a 4 AP earring, and you're looking at upgrading, and these are your options for AP upgrades in your earring slot. If you look at Blue Coral versus Witch, there's a lot of players that are still under the impression that Witch earring is a good item, and it is not. It is the worst earring in the game, and the reason for that is because of, as I said, AP efficiency. Witch earrings are artificially inflated because people will buy these not to use them, but rather to melt them to get sharp black crystal shards. So every time you melt a witch earring, you get between 1 and 2 sharps, and that artificially drives the price of witch earring all the way to max. The earring isn't actually worth this much as a piece of gear. It's only worth that much, as I said, because people are melting it. So if we look at our AP increases here, you look at a Pry Blue Coral and a Pry Witch, and a lot of people think, oh, well, the Witch earring's better. It gives you 1 more AP, so I should go for that one. But this isn't the most important column. The most important column is over here. How much silver are you spending per point of AP? Now, the better your accessories get, the more silver you will be forced to spend on your upgrades. In other words, by the time you get all duo accessories, you're going to force to be spending, huge amounts of silver to get try. That's just the way it goes. But while you're starting out, you have some choices that you can compare to each other. And if you look at this in terms of efficiency, hopefully it's clear just from these numbers on the screen that the Blue Coral is way, way better. Just for a little bit more money, you could buy a Duo Blue Coral, which is better than a Pry Witch. And if you have enough money to get a Duo Witch, well, it's the same thing. Just spend a little bit more and instead get a Tri Blue Coral, and it's still going to give you more AP for about the same cost. By the time you get to a Tri Witch earring, if this were the best earring in the game, then I would say, okay, eventually it is worth spending the 62 mil per AP, but it's not. There are better earrings than the Witch, and by the time you're spending 500 million silver on your earring, there's other options that you're going to want to go for besides this. So there's never any point in your entire process of upgrading in which the Witch earring is a better option. Poor phrasing there, but you get the idea. You don't ever want to go for witch earrings when you have Blue Coral, which costs 2.5 times less silver for only 1 less point of AP. This is especially true if you are upgrading the item yourself. Now, I will say there is one caveat. If you buy a witch earring that somebody else upgraded, then I could see the argument for that. I wouldn't go for a Pry, but if you buy a Duo or a Tri Witch earring that someone else has upgraded and thrown on the market, that's an okay idea. And the reason for that is because upgrading a Blue Coral yourself, you're going to spend a lot more money than the market cost on average. So even though the market cost for a duo blue coral is 55 mil, you might spend twice that much. You might spend 100 something mil. And if you look at it in terms of that, well, a duo witch earring is 140 and it has the extra AP. So a purchased duo witch earring is comparable to a self-upgraded duo blue coral. However, a purchased blue coral is way better than a purchased witch earring, and a self-upgraded blue coral is way better than a self-upgraded witch earring. I hope that makes sense. The TLDR here is never upgrade witch earrings by yourself. If you can find one that's already upgraded to duo or tri, it's an okay investment, but you should still try to buy an upgraded blue coral instead. This is definitely going to be better. It's just these don't get posted on the market as much, so you might have to buy the witch earring if you're not enhancing yourself and if you want someone else to enhance it. But if you are buying, this is a better one to buy. If you're making it yourself, this is a better one to make. That's pretty much how it breaks down. So moving on, let's talk about some other slots. The ring here, you basically have two options for an intermediate ring. You can upgrade a Mark of Shadow to Pry or Duo, depending on what your bank looks like. There's also a quest ring that is equivalent to a Pry Mark. So if you'd rather go do the story quest in Valencia, it's got some other rewards as well, as and it also gives you a good chunk of contribution XP. So I would say it is worth your time to go out and run the Valencia quest and get the 7 AP rings from that. But if you're not a big fan of quests, you can just make a Pry Mark and that'll be 7 AP as well. The Duo Mark is also a good option. By the time you're ready to go for a Tri Mark, you may consider going for Crescent Rings instead, but we'll talk about that in the last section. As an intermediate player, aim for a Pry or a Duo Mark, whatever you can afford. And like I said, think about getting that quest ring from Valencia, which will be equivalent to a Pry Mark and have like a little bit of extra health on it. Now let's talk about neck and belt. These two are going to go together. You're going to want to get the Schultz belt and the Schultz neck, but you're not going to want to go for these until you can afford to push them to at least duo. And the reason for that is because a duo Schultz neck, rather, let me put it this way, a Pry Schultz neck is equivalent to a Tri Barris necklace. So a Tri Barris necklace is a lot easier to make or acquire than a Pry Schultz neck. So get your Barris belt and your necklace both to try before you look at Schultz. And then once you have the funds to at least push the Schultz neck to duo or make attempts for duo, that's when you should upgrade to Schultz. But go straight from your Barris accessories to your Schultz accessories. Do not invest money in the Ancient Core set. This is another trap just like the Witch Earring. These are artificially inflated because, like the Witch Earring, they can be melted for sharps. So the Ancient Seal gives 1 to 2 sharps, and the Ancient Core belt gives 1 sharp each time you melt it. I see a lot of new player guides recommending that you go for this, and it's just not good advice. If the prices on these were much lower, say that there's a sharp event and the prices on these go down, there's a lot more sharps in the market. If this was literally like 5 times less expensive, then it would be an okay intermediate piece. But as it stands, these are very overpriced, and the stats that you get from them aren't even that good. A lot of it is slated towards DP, which you don't need while leveling. And the accuracy from the set effect doesn't scale as you go up, and it's only plus 20. That's not that much. You can get that accuracy in other places much more easily than paying the super inflated prices for the Ancient set. So skip this and go straight from Barris to Schultz. In terms of armor, I would say as an intermediate player, you might have enough money where you can start bidding on boss armor, but probably not. You probably want to stick with your Gurnal or your Heve and upgrade that all the way to Duo or even Tri. Duo and Tri fails on armor that's on Gurnal and Heve armor are really good for fail stacking. So if you get frustrated trying to push your Heve to Tri, and you generate like a 40 fail stack out of that, that's actually a really cheap way to get a 40 fail stack. So don't necessarily feel too bad about that. If you don't want to mess with the RNG too much, you can stop these at Duo for now and just try to go straight to boss gear after that. But I do think it's worth upgrading your Gurnal and your Heve to Try while you wait for your boss gear to come in, or while you wait to get to the point where you can afford to go for that boss gear. Because like I said, even if you fail, you're going to get some very, very efficient fail stacks in the process. Now, before we talk about the final part of the guide, where we go over boss gear and end-game accessories, I want to talk to you guys for just a second about data mined stats, because these are going to be very important. In this case, we're going to look at offhands. So when you look at the parrying dagger in-game, all you see is DP. Here, let me show it real quick. We'll go to sub-weapon. We'll take a look at a tri-parrying dagger. And all you see here is 28 DP. That can actually mean two different things. DP comes in the form of evasion and damage reduction. Damage reduction is exactly what it sounds like. If somebody hits you for 10 damage and you have 1 damage reduction, then you'll only take 9, right? You'll reduce it by 1. Evasion is dodge, so it doesn't reduce the damage per hit, but it gives you a chance to avoid the hit altogether. So if you had 10% evasion, then 9 out of 10 times someone would hit you for full damage, but 1 out of 10 times they would miss and they would do 0 damage whatsoever. So both of these do the same thing effectively. They both reduce the amount of damage that you're taking, but they do it in different ways. And this becomes important based on how people gear for late game PvP. There's basically a 4-way rock, paper, scissors game when it comes to accuracy and evasion. If you look up on the screen there, to put it simply, accuracy beats evasion, evasion beats AP, AP beats damage reduction, and damage reduction beats accuracy. So none of these things are strictly better than the others. It all just depends on what situation you find yourself in and how your opponent is geared. In the current meta, most people, when they go for a hybrid or a defensive build, focus on evasion rather than damage reduction. There's some items that give evasion that are really effective right now. People stacking DR just haven't really seen the results from doing that they would like to see. So generally when people go for a hybrid or a defensive build, they do stack evasion. However, that's something that could always shift in the future. If literally everybody starts building evasion, that means that in response to that, people are going to start building a lot of accuracy, which has already happened. And if everybody starts running around in accuracy builds, some people are going to get clever and start running damage reduction to counter those low AP, high accuracy builds. You see how this goes as the game evolves. If everybody starts running damage reduction, people will go back to AP builds, and then people will start running evasion. It's constantly going to go back and forth depending on what the flavor of the month is. So it's really just going to be up to you and how rigidly you want to follow the meta, or if you want to try to be clever and get ahead of it. But again, you can look on the screen there to see kind of how the rock, paper, scissors game works here. With that in mind, as I said, in the current state of the game, evasion does seem to be more effective than damage reduction in terms of stacking it. So this spreadsheet right here will tell you the hidden stats, whether you're getting evasion or whether you're getting damage reduction. The example here, the ultimate parrying dagger, if we look at try, we said it had 28 DP, 27 of that is evasion and only 1 is DR. So if you're stacking evasion, parrying dagger is a really good choice. The Rosar dagger, on the other hand, has a little bit more DP overall, but only 23 of that evasion, or of that DR, is evasion, and 7 of it is damage reduction. So if you're going for a pure evasion build, you want the parrying dagger. If you're going for a mix, the Rosar is better. Rosar also has an extra crystal slot, which gives it an advantage. It doesn't matter too much which one of these you pick if you want the defensive option. But we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go slot by slot. I just wanted to give you guys an overview real quick of how DP works in this game and how you can find the data mine stats. I'll put a link to this in the description if you're not already aware of how to find this. But with that being said, let's now go slot by slot like we did earlier and talk about what the boss gear and long-term accessories you're going to want to look for are. For main hand, obviously, if you don't know, the best weapon in the game is the Zarka weapon. This has the same AP as Laverto, which is the other boss option, but it has about 5% more hidden accuracy. So Zarka is hands down better than Liberto. However, Liberto still has its place. If you can't afford the Zarka, or if you haven't been lucky, you haven't been able to get one off the market, they're just too rare, Liberto will hit just as hard in PvE, but it will have a little bit less accuracy in PvP. The trade-off is it's easier to upgrade in terms of cost, and it if you're just buying one off the market that's already upgraded, it's much cheaper. I would use the same philosophy here that we use when looking at the Green Awaken versus the Blue Awaken weapon. And that philosophy, to recap, is as long as you can resell the Liberto when you're done with it, then it's a good placeholder. It's a good investment until you can get the final best-in-slot Zarka. Be really careful. There are some classes that absolutely cannot resell Liberto, like if you look at the Liberto Longbow. Actually, this looks like maybe after a few days it would sell, but at any given time, Liberto is in danger of crashing. Same thing as those Blue Awaken weapons we talked about earlier. As more and more people get into the game and upgrade from Liberto to Zarka, this market becomes more and more flooded. So unless there's something driving new players to the game, like another Steam release, something of that sort, then eventually Liberto will crash. So just be very careful. Make sure you can resell this when you're done with it. But if you feel confident that you can resell it, then it's definitely worth the investment to use in the meantime until you get a Zarka. This is a huge, Liberto is a massive upgrade over your Correa weapon or your Rosar weapon, so it's a great placeholder in the meantime. But if you don't feel like you could resell your Liberto, then just save up some extra money and go straight to Zarka. Now for Offhand, this is where this is going to be the most probably complicated choice that you have to make late in the game. For some classes, it's actually very easy, and I'll put those up on the screen again. We saw this earlier when we were talking about starter gear. For these 5 classes, Warrior, Valk, Zerker, DK, and Striker, there is one offhand that is hands down the best offhand. It gives you both accuracy and evasion, and especially in the current meta where accuracy and evasion are very important, there's just no debate that these are the offhands you should be going for PvP. Similarly, in PvE, there is only one option for every class, and that is the Kudum offhand. The Kudum, I know on paper this looks like it has less AP than Nuver, but there's actually been numerous tests to prove that Kudum does more damage in PvE than Nuver. It seems to have hidden monster damage of some kind. So Kudum will always outperform Nuver in PvP. And unfortunately, accuracy offhands will generally outperform Nuver in PvP, meaning that Nuver doesn't really have a place in the game currently. It needs a buff, or there needs to be some kind of shift. The problem is, even if the meta shifts, if you look at, for example, an Ultimate Steel Dagger at Try, this has like 6 AP less than a Try Nuver. But because of the special attack damage, this will do more damage in most cases than a Nuver. If you're hitting someone in the back, or if you're hitting someone on the ground, the Steel Dagger is actually better than Nuver. Sorry for laughing. A lot of people are still really committed to the Nuver. They are in disbelief that it doesn't have a place in the game currently. But I will strongly argue here that Nuver is just straight up bad, and unless it gets buffed, it doesn't have a place in either PvP or PvE. Again, in PvE, you want to use the Kudum, and in PvP, you basically have a couple different options. Against undergeared opponents, you can use the AP offhand, if you feel like someone doesn't have a lot of evasion, if you feel like they might be stacking DR, then the AP offhand here is decent. But again, because of that special attack damage, in most cases it's going to outdamage the Nuver. The Nuver will do more damage against someone who's standing up, but who cares? You want to get someone on the ground to do your damage to them anyways. So I really don't feel like Nuver is worth the investment. In the current meta, you're actually going to get more damage in most cases out of the AP offhand. So if we're just sticking to daggers, the AP option here would be the Bronze Dagger. This isn't going to have as much AP, but because of the extra accuracy that you get, you're going to do more damage against well-geared opponents. There's also, in addition to people stacking evasion, there's also just an inherently high evasion score on boss gear, especially on dim tree armor and muskin boots. So you need to get some accuracy somewhere in your setup. It doesn't have to be your offhand, but offhand is a really smart choice. If you want to do the most damage possible in the current meta, I would recommend that you go for an accuracy offhand. However, evasion offhands are just as good. We talked about this a little bit earlier between the Parrying Dagger and the Rosar. If you're stacking evasion on your accessories as well, which we'll talk about next, then I would go for the Parrying Dagger. If you have an AP build and you just want a defensive offhand, then Rosar is good for the extra crystal slot and for a good mix of evasion and DR. But for classes that can't get both, in other words, for classes that don't have accuracy and evasion on the same piece, you're going to have to make a choice. If you're a dagger class, or if you're, a hornbow class, ninja, kuno, tamer, sork, all of you guys have to make a choice between whether you want accuracy for more offense or evasion for more defense. And that's just going to be up to you and your playstyle and what you feel like your role is in PvP. If you want that survivability or if you want that extra damage. But if you're a class that can use Vanguards, Serenot, or Leather Vambrace, then the choice is already made for you, and you don't have to choose between those two stats. So that pretty much covers offhands. Let's go on to Awakened Weapons. Not much to say here. The Dandelion is the best awakening weapon in the game. There's no other boss choice. There's only one, just the Dandy. So once you can get it, you should get it. When you're in the market for a Dandelion, these are very, very hard to buy. They're extremely contested, so you want to put up a notification for literally every different Dandelion on the market. +8, +5, +7. Put a notification for every single one of these and bid like crazy and hope that you get lucky. You can also roll Night Vendor to try to get a Dandelion, and then, of course, kill Kuranda and hope you get lucky. That's the final way. But regardless, you're going to need some luck, regardless of which technique you use, so best of luck, and just make sure you try every chance you get to purchase a Dandelion off the market once you can afford it. Let's talk about accessories next. So, since we were already talking a little bit about evasion, let's talk about the potential evasion accessories that you can go for. The best one is going to be the Centaur belt. So the Centaur belt is all evasion. Again, you can check this stuff on the data mine spreadsheet. But this gives you DP and health. If you want a more defensive build, Centaur is by far the best piece you can get right now. It's 100% evasion. You can stack it with other evasion pieces, and it's a very noticeable increase to your defense. If you would rather go for a more aggressive build, then you're going to want to choose between either the Tree Spirit belts or the Basilisk belt. The Tree Spirit belt has a little bit less AP than the Basilisk belt, but the trade-off is that it has more accuracy. In the current meta, I would say the Tree Spirit belt is probably better, but again, it's that rock, paper, scissors game. People may not always be stacking evasion, and against an evasion that's not, or against an opponent who's not stacking evasion, you'll probably get more damage out of the Bassi belt. So it's really up to you and where you want to fall in that rock, paper, scissors game. Keep in mind, eventually in Kama Sylvia 2, there will be a Tungrad belt coming out that eclipses the Bassi belt, but we don't know much about it yet in terms of how common it will be. It will probably be a lot more expensive than the Bassi belt, and Kama Sylvia Part 2 could still be many months away. So I wouldn't hold out for it, but it's just something to keep in mind. For earrings, there are a couple really good choices. The best choice for most classes, in my opinion, is going to be the red coral earring. Even if you are running a defensive build, people still tend to use the earring slot for offense. And the reason for that is just because the red coral earring is insanely well statted. It gives you a good amount of AP, and in addition to having a good amount of AP, it gives you a ton of accuracy. So, like I said before, you have to get accuracy somewhere. Even if an opponent is not stacking evasion at all, you still need some accuracy just to counter the evasion they get from their boss gear. And a red coral earring is a very good place to get this accuracy from. So I would recommend that you get 2 of these in most cases. However, there is another option that's good for some classes. The Tungrad earring will give you more AP than the red coral earring, and it will also increase your black spirit rage by 10%. So with 2 of these, you can get your BSR up to 20 or up to 120% max. If you're playing a class and you really enjoy the 100% on your class, some good examples would be Wizard and Warrior, or even Sork have a really good 100%. They're very useful in sieges. So if you're in love with your class's 100% and you want to use it as much as you can, then go for Tungrads. If you're not in love with your class's 100%, if it's kind of mediocre, or if it's just not something that you think is mind-blowingly awesome, just go for the red coral. You will get more damage, even though the Tungrad has more AP. You'll get more damage in most cases with the red coral against other players because of that extra accuracy stat. So it's very good. There's a couple other options that I guess we can mention. Some people think the blue whale molar earring is good. I don't see why, but I'm not gonna state outright that this is bad because there are a lot of people who swear by this. I think Gundel actually uses these. I don't know, maybe that's just a rumor, but there are people in my guild that run these, and they swear that that extra 100 health keeps them alive. I could see an extra 200 health being really useful in 1v1, but in Siege, I just don't really see myself living with 100 or 200 health that often, so I personally think this is a waste. I think these are way overpriced, but you know, if you want an AP option that has a little bit of health smacked onto it, I guess you can go for these. I personally wouldn't recommend it, but who knows? Maybe there's some benefit here that I'm not fully seeing. Now let's move on to necklace. There are some really good options for necklace. Most people, again, will use this slot for offense, but there is a really good hybrid next. We'll start with that one. The hybrid necklace is called Sissel's necklace. And the reason people like this piece is because, again, all the DP on Sissel's neck is evasion. So people will hybridize this plus the centaur belt rather than going for like a DP ring, because all the DP rings are damage reduction instead of evasion. So for a hybrid piece, Sissel's neck is very popular. It gives a good mix of AP and evasion. If you want to be more aggressive, you have three options here. There's the Ogre ring and Leighton's ring, which are the best AP rings, necklaces. Even though Ogre ring is called a ring, it's actually a necklace. But yeah, these are the best necklaces in terms of AP. The problem here is availability. These don't get posted to the market as much, and when they do get posted, they're very contested. So if you want to use a necklace that's a little bit less efficient but much easier to get your hands on, you can get the Serap's neck. This won't be as good in terms of AP per silver, but you know, you can actually buy them. So it's the trade-off there. If you want something that's more available but less efficient, you can go for the Seraps. If you don't mind pre-ordering or dealing with the scarcity of Ogre rings, then you can go for these instead. Finally, let's talk about rings. You heard me mention that there are some really good damage reduction rings. Unfortunately, there are basically no rings in the game that give evasion currently. There's a green ring, this one, I think this gives evasion, but obviously it's garbage. I wouldn't recommend using it. However, if you want to stack damage reduction, the Kadri ring is very strong. Some people who go full defense will use evasion on their neck and belt and then still use Kadris for the extra DR. And they become really, really hard to kill at that point. So Kadri is a decent, you know, cheap option if you want to go the damage reduction route. However, most people use their rings for AP, and there's pretty much only one choice for that in late game, and that is the Ring of the Crescent Guardian. This gives a ton of AP. There's not, like I said, not really many other rings that would make you want to not use these. So unless you're going for like a full defensive build with Kadri, which most of you shouldn't be doing, I would recommend using your ring slot for offense. Even if you're running a hybrid build, I would recommend using this for offense and going for the Crescent Guardian in most cases. That covers accessories. Let's just talk about armor real quick. There's not much to say here. Most of you guys probably already know what the best armor is. There's only one set of boss gear. There's two different chest pieces. We'll talk about that in a second. The best gloves in the game, boss gloves, are Beg's gloves. This is the first piece of boss gear that you should be going for. It's the easiest one to buy off the market, and it has the most noticeable effect in PvP. You'll get the extra accuracy from leveling up your Beg's gloves. It's very, very nice. The next piece you should go for is Muskin boots. This is the only pair of boss boots in the game. These have evasion increase. They're a very, very strong defensive piece. Finally, the third piece you should go for is Dim Tree Armor. This has actually almost as much evasion as Muskin's. It's a little bit weaker, but it's a very strong piece, and it's got that extra 200 health tacked onto it as well. So this should be the third piece you go for. But honestly, when it comes to boss gear, you kind of just get it whenever you get it. You don't really decide the order. You get lucky with drops. You bid on these, and you get lucky with winning one off of bid, and that's probably what's going to decide the order that you get them in. But in terms of effort, you know, try to get Begs first, try to get Muskins, and then go for Tree. Gaia's Helm is the last piece of boss armor, and it's also the least important, so aim to get this one last, but again, RNG is RNG. There is one other chest piece that we should talk about, Red Nose Armor. It's not as bad as people say it is. It has the same hidden stats as Dimtree, so all the hidden evasion that you get from this is really, really good. It's good to use as a placeholder if you haven't been able to get Dimtree and you want to finish off your boss set. It's very strong. It's going to be probably a bigger defense upgrade than, you know, having like a roaring chest piece or a Gurnal chest piece. It's going to be noticeable when you upgrade to Red Nose. So I would say it's, you know, I would say it's worth it, even though it doesn't have that extra 200 health that Dimtree does. It's a good placeholder to use until you can acquire Dimtree, and it costs much less. Try to buy one that's already upgraded if you can, though. These tend to get posted sometimes at prior duo. Since it's not as contested, you might be able to snipe one and avoid the hassle of upgrading it to plus 15 yourself. That pretty much covers the gearing guide. I hope you guys found this useful. If you would like to support this kind of content, I'll put a little button to my Patreon in the bottom right corner, and a huge thank you to anyone who decides that this is worthwhile enough to do that. If you guys have more questions about this stuff, you can post them in the comments below. You can also visit my Twitch channel, Moreland TV. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching.